through the words that we use. Because words shape and make worlds. And so as we continue in this narrative of discipleship, the question I was considering is, how can I hear God? You ever wondered about that? You know, some people literally and figuratively, but some people literally hear God speaking to them. That happens to me reasonably often. It's kind of like there's this internal dialogue going on between, and I imagine that's what it was like for Jesus actually. I just would have loved to know what arguments he and God was having, you know. I want you to go through Samaria. I really don't want to go through Samaria. You're going through Samaria. Okay then. But I think the best glimpse we have is in the Garden of Gethsemane, where Jesus said, God, I really don't want to go through this, but not my will, but yours be done. And that really sums up the ultimate destination that is required of us as disciples. That is how we know that we can listen to the voice of God when we say, not my will, but yours be done. Not what I want to do, Lord, but what you want me to do. And they say a surrendered heart is actually able and willing and fully on intent and in purpose to know the path that God has for them. Because their heart lines up with the purpose and the heart and the will of God. And so even if they don't want to do something, they want to do it. And another fancy word for that is the call that God has on your life. I had a call to become a pastor 29 years ago. Well, it's probably about 30 years ago. Rebecca still hasn't worked out if she has a call to be a pastor's wife, but that's her journey, and she's actually done an amazing journey with it. But how can I hear God? Now, we're going to look at a little bit of that this morning, but I want to share with you a story, a little sort of snippet from Matthew 17. 6 days later, Jesus took Peter and the two brothers, James and John, sons of thunder, and he led them up a high mountain to be alone. You ever done that? You just want to get away, you don't want to see anyone? Take a couple of people with you. I reckon if you're an introvert, the best friends you have are those that don't talk to you when you want to be alone, but you know they're there. One of the best times I ever had was going to a silent retreat with 30 other people, because none of them could talk to me, but I knew they were there. So I wasn't alone. I wasn't lonely, but I was alone with my thoughts, and I was alone with God anyway. As the men watched, Jesus' appearance was transformed so that his face shone like the sun, the Shekinah glory of God. Wouldn't that be amazing? And his clothes became as white as light. Well, if I was James and John or Peter and that happened, I'd be like, wow. But wait, there's more. Suddenly, Moses and Elijah appeared and began talking with Jesus. And I love Peter. Lord, it's wonderful for us to be here. If you want, I'll make 3 shelters as memorials, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. But even as he spoke, a bright cloud overshadowed them, and a voice from the cloud said, "This is my dearly loved Son, who brings me great joy. Listen to him." Listen to him. Out of all the things that God speaking out of a cloud could have said, he just said, listen to him. It takes God to manifest himself in a presence to remind us that the first thing that we should do is listen to Jesus. What was so hard about that? Consider poor Peter. You know, I love Peter because he's the rock upon which God will build the church. But he stuffed up so many times. His heart got in front of his head. His responses were not really thought out. Jesus rebuked him and said, "Get behind me, Satan." He went and cut some guy's ear off. Jesus put it back on. The guy was a ratbag, but he was passionate, and he never stopped loving it. You can imagine that final scene at the end of John's Gospel, when Jesus pulls him aside and says, "Peter, do you love me?" "Yeah, I love you, Lord." feed my sheep. Peter, do you love me? Well, yeah, I do love you, Lord. You know everything. Then feed my lambs. Peter, do you love me? Now, he must have been getting a little bit cheesed off by this point. Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. Then guide my sheep. And he let Peter know the sort of life that he would lead. That I think Peter could too echo those words, Lord, not my will, but yours be done. And if you thought crucifixion was bad that Jesus went through, Peter was crucified upside down. That would have been really painful. So here's Peter. And I can just imagine it, he's blown away that, well, hey, I'm in the inner circle. I mean, there's me and there's James and John, who remember their mother came to Jesus and said, could you make one of them sit on your right and one on your left? And Jesus sort of went, well, that's not for me to decide. But you can imagine Peter's like, woo, I'm Peter the Rock. I'm with James and John. Maybe they'll be seated on the right and the left, but I'm in the inner circle of Jesus. And then we're up this mountain because he wants to be on his own and we're going to look after him. And then all of a sudden he transfigures himself. The Shekinah glory of God was just overwhelming. And then the two most important people that they knew of up to that point in Scripture, or two of the most important, Moses and Elijah turn up. I mean, they are rock stars in the Hebrew tradition. They are the most important VIPs. And there's Peter, a nobody, just a fisherman from Galilee. He's there with them. You can imagine what's thoughts going through his head. If I could get Moses and Elijah to come with us down the mountain and everybody else got to see them, then they could simply tell people who Jesus is. People would listen to them. Everybody would listen to them, wouldn't they? This was huge. So Peter, and I'm assuming James and John get distracted and they get caught up in the credibility of the moment. Then God speaks. And he says, this is my dearly beloved Son who brings me great joy. Listen to him. Because maybe they were waiting to hear what Moses and Elijah were going to say. And God went, don't worry about them. You want to see a rock star? You want to hear the most important dynamic that you could ever hear? Listen to Jesus. And you remember when Jesus fed the 5,000 and they came to him after and he said, who do the people say that I am? Because many people left because his teachings were hard. listen to Jesus. I mean, this is God, the creator of the universe, speaking. You take notice of what he said. If he said, listen to the trees, oh, listen to the trees. Their bark is worse than their bite. You twigged onto that, didn't you? I'll leave it alone. Well, I'll leave that alone and we'll just branch back into something else. But because there is a lot of things that we can listen to. There are many things that can distract us. And a lot of those things may seem to be good things to listen to. They may actually teach us a lot about Jesus. They may lead us into a deeper understanding of certain aspects of Scripture. They may give us greater insight into who we are in terms of a psychological perspective, or they may give us an insight into how we function as human beings. So there's nothing wrong with knowing these things. But God said, first and foremost, listen to Jesus. And there are things that might be of Jesus. They aren't Jesus. So that's a simple dynamic. See, the thing is, the Christian journey is incredibly simple, but profoundly difficult. And this is one of those simple dynamics. Listen to him. Well, that can be really hard at times, because there are so many things to listen to. Who likes listening to people? There's about 4 of you in here. What worries me is none of the counsellors put their hand up front. Okay. But you see, when you're going to listen to people, you need to be in the best place and space to listen. Have you ever gone to a concert with the intention of having an in-depth discussion with someone? Generally not the best place to do it. When I went to the Dragon concert with Rebecca's sisters, because she was stuck here, one of her sisters said, oh, I want to have a chat with you about something. And I'm like, this is really not the good time to do that. I mean, the speakers were booming. I can't hear you at the best of times. Can't hear you at all now. And she goes, what? And I went, exactly. So the conversation hasn't been had yet. But another thing that, have you turned up the volume in the car? Or have you turned up the TV? Or have you put headphones on maybe when someone wants to try to talk to you? Yes, honey, I saw that look. The bane of Rebecca's life at the moment, my hearing aid's Bluetooth to my phone. She thinks I'm listening to her, and I'm actually listening to something on the phone, music or a podcast. But I've perfected over the years this ability to look interested in what it is that I might be saying. Most husbands learn that after a while. I saw the guys that go, yeah. That's our secret weapon. But we can inadvertently do that with Jesus. We can get distracted by everything going on around us, because active listening is actually quite tiring. When you're intent on listening to somebody who's with you, that is actually, sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is have a sleep, to make sure that you have enough energy to be present for other people. And listening is part of our worship practice. And one of the best ways to listen to Jesus is to understand what is our worship pathway. How do we connect with God? How do we connect with Jesus? So I want to run through quickly what some of those are. There's the relational pathway. People struggle doing this on their own. They need others. Who's an extrovert? You need to have people around you to work things out. Put an extrovert in a room on their own and they'll slowly die. Put an introvert in a room on their own, they'll love it. But extroverts need people around them, so they need others, and they'll process externally. And you really think that? No, I'm just thinking out loud. Have you ever heard people saying that? They literally are thinking out loud. They are working it out as they're telling you about it. An introvert won't say anything until they've already worked it out. Introverts and extroverts clash like that. Then you have people that are their intellectual pathway. Now, I've met quite a few of these people over the years. If you go to somewhere like a Bible college or meet them, they use study Bibles, they use commentaries, they understand the original Greek and the Hebrew. They just love getting into the intellectual dynamics and working out what does that word mean, how often is it used in the Bible, where does it come from, what's the history of it, and they can tell you all of that. Who can remember when Jonathan Robertson was here a few weeks ago? That guy is an intellectual pathway person. I don't understand him half the time, but he's a good friend of mine. And the thing is, they're often not as moved by stories or testimonies, but they are gripped by things that stimulate their mind. Like they love the biographies of Martin Luther, John Calvin and Chuck Colson. They're great theologians. But if you tell them, God healed that person of cancer or something, well, that's not. What were they thinking at the time when that happened? What? And then you have people that's the serving pathway. We've got a few of those in here, haven't we, Vicky? I'm just picking on you now. She hates it. They get their biggest buzz by serving quietly and seeing others blessed and responding to God. They don't seek any attention, and they just do it because that's how they connect with God. They just love doing the thing. Sometimes they might feel a little bit taken for granted, but these people are the hands and feet that make dreams come true. And there's a lot of them in this church. Then we have the contemplative pathway, which is a little bit of me. Meditative, quiet, reflective, spend long periods on their own. They write songs that bless us. They write books that stretch us. You guys know of Henry Nouwen? Or Henri Nouwen? He's a French missiologist, great visionary thinker. The thing with contemplative pathway people is don't pressure them to do more, because they're reflective thinkers. They drive you up the wall because you think they're not doing anything. Then all of a sudden all the stuff gets in, because it's just been sitting in their head percolating away as they've been contemplating on what it is that God has been telling them, and then they just put it out. Intellectual pathway people and contemplative pathway people really clash, because I don't like sitting down and surrounding myself with Bible studies and commentaries. I do it at times, but I prefer to take something away and percolate over it like a good coffee. It's biblical because it talks about Hebrews. Then you have the activist pathway. People that are living at the edge of their potential. They want to go out there and they want to see something change. They want to be able to put their energy and their investment into something that's going to make a difference. They always want to be taking things head on, and they want to lead great causes. Think of William Booth, founder of Salvation Army, Soup Soap Salvation. Charles Wesley started the Methodist movement. Jesus started the Jesus movement. He was an activist, but often they can come across as rebels. And we're sort of like, whoa, hang on, that's a bit out of the box. I'm not sure if I can relate to this person. But we need these people. We need people that are relational, that are intellectual, that serve, that are contemplative, that are active. And we need to allow them to express their worship pathway, because that is when they hear and listen to Jesus. If you told an activist, I'm sorry, you're not allowed to do anything, they will wither and die. You tell a relational person they have to go away for 40 days on their own, they will just detest that. You tell a contemplative person that they have to stay in a room with 50 people and run something every day, that would kill them. We need to each have that space and place to be able to connect with God, because then we can focus on what we last heard and not really be listening in the moment. And this can be quite important, because to listen, you need to be present, and you need to be in touch with who you are as a person. Because who knows another way of God describes himself? He says, I am. He doesn't say I was. He's not in the past. He doesn't say I will be in the future. He says I am in the present, in the moment. I mean, he is in the past and he is in the future, but what he's really saying to us, in this moment I am with you. In this moment you can hear me if you would but listen. Because we don't live in the past and we don't live in the future. We can only exist in this moment. And the fact that we remember it, that's what creates the past. The fact that we can look forward, that's what gives us hope. But sometimes we can get so fixated on what we want to hear that we miss what is actually said. Sometimes we're so fixated on what we'd like the future to be like that we're predetermining what it is that we want God to say to us. And when he says something else, we don't hear it because that's not what we wanted to understand. That happens in marriages and relationships a lot. People hear different things to what's being said. Sometimes we can approach God with questions and scenarios and we want answers and solutions. Jesus wants to talk with us first. He doesn't always want to give us answers and solutions. I think it's a bit like in the Garden of Eden, when God walked with Adam and Eve in the cool of the end of the day. I'm sure they had lots of questions, but I can imagine that the first thing that God would have said to them is, "So how are you? What's going on? Where are you at? What's your feeling? What's going on in your mind at the moment? What are you struggling with? How do you feel?" Because I think the things that God is saying is He wants us, and He may ask us to consider the lessons that we could learn from the situations that we're in, or what we can or should be learning. He may be saying, put down your rights, put down your questions, put down your scenarios. Listen to me, take up your cross and follow me. It may not be easy at the moment, but I didn't say it was going to be. Don't be surprised. When you take up your cross and follow me, that's going to cost. So if there's a cost that comes along at times, guess what? I told you that was going to happen. But sometimes we can be so full of the situation that we're in, or so consumed with the scenario or the agenda, so focused on that we aren't present in the moment to hear what it is that God is saying to us, and often we're struggling. Do you understand? Have you ever been in that place? You just want this thing to work itself out. You just want God to give you a nice quick answer. And the problem is that we live in a world that gives us quick answers that actually often don't really work long term. So what do we do when we don't think that we can hear God? Well, know your worship pathway. Be still and know your worship pathway. And sometimes if you're an activist or you're an intellectual, contemplative people, when you say, be still and know I am God, they go, oh yeah, it's easy. An activist, you want me to be